We're the largest in Canada, and from what people have told us, we're the most active and engaged consortium globally between government, regulators, ecosystem, community.
Hey folks, Flo here with Crypto News Canada. We're here at the Canadian Blockchain Summit in beautiful Calgary. I'm here with none other than Koleya Karringten, founder, executive director. Give her all the superlatives you want. Fun fact about Koleya, she told me the night before yesterday that I was the first person to interview her. So she's now my most recent interview, and I'm thrilled to be speaking with you. First of all, a couple of thoughts on how the event is going, who's here. I mean, you've done so many of those.
Well, we really try to get the most incredible thought leaders, influencers, decision makers, and executives in the ecosystem. So when we do our events, we don't try to be big, right? We're not trying to be like Collision, Consensus, futurist. We're trying to make this really intimate gathering of a couple hundred of the brightest minds in this space to be able to come together and do business. So everything that we do at these events is create this amplified experience where people can feel welcomed into your branded lounge, where they can have drink service at the lounge, they can eat, they can enjoy, but most importantly, they can meet with the kind of people who can collaborate with them and help bring that business forward. So we've gotten lots of great feedback. We sold out. We oversold actually we oversold actually, so it's a great, standing room only in the auditorium, but also lots of people still out here able to network. So the speakers really appreciate it, and the people who are sponsoring the lounges really appreciate it. So it's been a great event.
I love the venue as well. The circular room we're looking at, really conducive, I think, to this kind of intimacy, and you can sort of see everyone here. And was that also something that drew you to this specific location?
Yes. So we always take feedback from our previous events, because what we want to do is we want to be better. We want to create the experience for everyone. You might not remember everything you learned and everyone you met, but you're going to remember how you felt about attending. Yeah. And with this, it was really particular to be able to do that theater style seating, right? Mm-hmm. So that we were able
and that domed roof. I mean, that's awesome.
And the domed roof, which was fantastic, because we want the speakers there. The topics are amazing. We spend a lot of time curating really important and impactful topics. Yeah. What's happening to the ecosystem today. We put the best speakers, the ones that are most engaging and conversational up there.
Some of them are pretty funny.
Right? And when you have that seated table with table rounds, people have a lot more opportunity for side conversation. And then they're going to miss all that really impactful, conversation happening on stage.
The theater style.
Exactly. But we do our events in such a way where we let people know this is a business conference. It's a networking event as well. So catch the panels you want to catch, because you're going to be engaged when you see them, but network when you want to network. Yeah. So that limits the side conversation, right? So they're really there when they want to have it. Yeah. And then we wanted to create a venue where people had that opportunity to really be able to network. Yeah. And so the space at Contemporary Calgary was perfect, because when I first saw it, I had this vision of lounges, comfortable couches, chairs, balloon arches, coffee tables.
Next year we're getting the comfy chairs, yeah?
Right. Oh, absolutely. And that was kind of like a window into almost like your living room. You're being invited in to sit down and have a real conversation, as opposed to staring at a trade show booth. Yeah. Right? Because you don't do business at a trade show booth. You look and you're like, oh, kind of what do you do? And you get more.
Creates a bit of distance as well between people.
Yeah, it does. Where it's when people get to break bread together, that's where business happens. When people say they do more business on the golf course than the boardroom, it's because they're having a drink, they're going for lunch, they're being able to build that sense of camaraderie. They have something to do together. So here it's you're drinking, you're eating, you're listening to great music, you're lounging together. You have lots of discussion points, and we even make our speakers introduce themselves with a fun fact. It's personalize yourself. Sometimes people get a little intimidated to walk up to a speaker. Yeah. And it's oh gosh, you read this massive bio and it's oh, can I really talk to them?
It humanizes the person.
Exactly. So you hear people go I like to skydive, and that gives you an opportunity, an icebreaker. So when you want to talk to that person that's oh my God, look at your career. It's you like skydiving, and you're going to get them immediately engaged with you, as opposed to you have a very impressive carear. Yeah.
Well, let me take this opportunity, because you have an amazing background story. I know it. We've interviewed for the first time 10 years ago. It's unbelievable. But I'd love you to tell our viewers what was your journey basically to crypto, and start with your personal, family, business journey in a few minutes, and what led you ultimately to blockchain and crypto.
Absolutely. Well, I guess the origin story is I was going to be a young mom, and my dad, he'd been teaching me business since I was 4.
Right.
Interesting story, but my dad really believed in building that next generation of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So I remember up to like 11 years old being in like weekend workshops with Jim Rohn, and Tony Robbins was in them too. And I got to learn from like Nido Qubein and all these amazing people. So we started a tech company because with my next generation coming forward, we wanted to do something that was going to benefit the environment.
Right. Clean tech, to be specific. Right?
Clean tech, before clean tech was a thing.
Yeah.
Right? Before it kind of got this virtue signaling greenwashing that everyone's kind of doing currently today, it was like, okay, we have this amazing resource sector in our energy industry, but how do we create more sustainability there? So we developed out a combustion burner system for oil and gas to be able to decrease their emissions by 44% while still operating their systems.
Yeah, it's called Absolute Combustion. We'll link in the description.
And so interestingly enough, it was a bit of a long road. Like I was young. I lost my dad 4 years into starting the business together.
Wow.
And I was really lucky. I got an opportunity with CNRL to do our first field trial.
Canadian Natural Resources Limited.
Sorry, acronyms. And unfortunately, halfway through the trial, 2014 recession hit. And it was like trying to bring something brand new that was also, clean tech before people cared about that particular term.
Yeah.
So 2 years in, I finally found this amazing, incredible woman. Her name is Suzanne West. She's definitely one of the big reasons to do what I do. I keep Absolute Combustion going for my father's legacy. But she commercialized our technology. She gave me my first contract. She gave me my first start. She mentored me.
Wow.
And then she was talking to me, like at the time I was getting into blockchain. I was starting to kind of research and learn about Bitcoin and understanding that better. And she had this idea for a group called the Alberta Blockchain Consortium. It's like, how do we bring this ecosystem together? How do we showcase that our energy industry is really a technology industry? Unfortunately, a couple months after we were like having this awesome back and forth, she died very similar to my dad of this insane aggressive brain cancer. And it was bad, the timing, like the day he had passed, she had found out she had it. She died 9 weeks later, very similar. So I was very devastated. And then a gentleman named James Graham with Guild One was like, we know how much you love her. Why don't you take her ABC idea and move it forward? So I incorporated as a not-for-profit. And then actually self-funded it with about $250,000 over a few years to really pick it up. Because I was like,
sorry, so you funded it to the tune of $250,000 of your own?
Yeah, I had another partner at the time who also put in $100,000 himself. So between the two of us, it was about $350K.
That's incredible.
And the idea there was, all right, let's grow the ecosystem. But we knew that we had to be different. We wanted to bring people together, but in a way they were willing to learn. So basically, I hosted nonstop events that were completely free where I did these insane charcuterie spreads for like 150 people. People came and ate. They were able to drink for free. We did kind of like panel style, but most impactfully, it was like 45 minutes of talk, but 2 hours of networking. So come, eat, drink, break bread, learn about it. We came up with every topic. What's like enterprise, regulation, DeFi, fintech. And after a year, we were the biggest one in Alberta, and people in other parts of Canada were like, hey, could you kind of do this stuff on a national level? Like, would you start coming out here? And Royal Bank was our very first member.
Wow.
They saw me host my very first event.
You wouldn't think necessarily, right, that a big four Canadian bank would be.
Yeah. But this amazing woman named Buffy Lammy, she saw me host the Blockchain and Technology Symposium. I had ministers there, deans of academic institutions, because my career in tech, I did trade missions with government. I worked with academics, U of A and U of C. I worked with government officials, and I had an amazing network for the business community and technology. So I was like, hey, this is tech. Why don't we look at how this incorporates into the broader tech ecosystem?
Yeah.
So that's where being able to get KPMGs and Accentures, Deloitte's, Royal Banks, all the big names. And so what we did was we developed out a board with them and said, look, we won't touch ICOs. We won't touch tokens at this time. We're really focusing on that enterprise. Let me prove to you that we will keep your brands, we'll amplify your brand through what we're doing. And we got their support from day one. And I mean, but our Royal Bank was our first member back in 2018.
So how many members do you have now?
75.
Wow.
Yeah, we're the largest in Canada. And from what people have told us, we're the most active and engaged consortium globally between government, regulators, ecosystem, community. And a big one was we saw what other groups were doing, And they were like, it was a pay for play. The membership fees were outrageous. Companies that couldn't afford membership couldn't even engage. And we're like, look, we're not a pay for play group. If this organization is going to be a voice for the ecosystem, the whole ecosystem gets a chance to lend their voice. Whether you're a member or not, we're here to support. We want the brand to grow.
Yeah.
A biggest value add with us right now is just the business development service that we offer.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah, you do a lot more than convene and advocate, right? Tell us about sort of the suite of services.
Directly. So part of the business development package, and the reason I designed it this way was my own frustration with my tech company trying to get with influential people to help make decisions.
Yeah.
You had all these sharks that were like, oh, if I make this intro, I get this percentage or that percentage. And it was like, they weren't doing it because they wanted to help me or support me. They were doing it in a shark style way. And I was like, look, we'll connect you with anyone, whether you're a member or not. The goal is rising tide floats all boats. If you need to connect with someone and you're a credible organization trying to do good work and you're also going to give back to the community, we're here to help and support. So we'll host these things we call Jeffersonian dinners. Okay. They're a time-honored tradition. They started with Thomas Jefferson 200 years ago. Okay. But you bring thought leaders to the table, right, of all varying shapes and sizes for companies, and you pose one question. The dinner's fully sponsored. So after people order their meal, it's the way that it works is I'll ask the question, and then who's ever speaking, everyone gives their full attention. And then we go around a 20-person table and everyone's having this really engaged conversation, but together in a big group. And then we learn from basically questions like, how do we support the ecosystem, or bits about regulation, things that are impactful. And people just love it because they get that real opportunity. They know everyone at the table, they get to engage, and business happens. People walk away from those dinners with deals. And then we also host our industry roundtable forums, and we develop out research papers from those. We bring these brain trusts together and develop out research to actually help our government understand the actual economic benefits of this industry. So a lot of times crypto is this, they focus on the tech really heavily, or they focus on what they want. What the government wants to know is, are you creating jobs? Are you paying your taxes? How are you supporting this country? How are you supporting its people? How are you being inclusive? How are you giving back to the community? And we're here to show just how much this community not only supports each other, is inclusive, but also gives back. So those kind of events. And then, of course, our big signature events showcasing people's brands, this big speaking opportunities. And we're starting to host events all across the country. We've done them in BC. We've done them in Alberta. We've done them in Ontario. We're going into Quebec and Atlantic Canada next year. So we're really broadening to make sure it's truly inclusive and truly national.
Look forward to seeing you in Quebec, where I live right now and where we've seen each other once before and had a great time.
One of our platinum members, Osler, just confirmed that we can host our first Montreal event in their Osler office. So thank you to them.
Exclusive news. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about Alberta's sort of crypto-friendliness and competitiveness in crypto, blockchain, Web3, because I mean, I can't help but think that you had something to do with where we are today. A lot of people here, of course, there's a lot of Albertans, but even others, I think, recognize that Alberta is certainly one of perhaps the principal hubs. So do you feel like, honestly, you had something to do with it? You and your, of course, fantastic team and supporters and so forth?
Well, I can say that when I first started in this ecosystem, it was a lot of, it was very fractured, and a lot of groups like, I can be the only one that does education, or I can be the only one that does this. And they weren't collaborative. They didn't really cooperate with each other. And it was like coming together to go, hey, look, guys, right now you have maybe 5% of this population actually interested, and you're fighting over 5% of the pie. If we all come together, then you can equally market to 5% of the pie, as opposed to trying to get the 0.05% for yourself. Yeah. So that kind of like being a neutral organization to like bring everyone to the table. And when we determined our business model, it was like, we're not competing with the consultants. We're not competing with the software developers. We're not trying to compete with the specific marketing companies. It's like, we're a consulate. We're a place where you can come and get access. You need legal services. You want to connect with accounting services. You want to connect with businesses in the space. You want to get your brand amplified. Like, we tried to find this like niche where it's like no one else was quite doing it, so no one felt threatened by us.
And the more you grow, of course, the more connections you create in the process.
And the more you're able to pay those connections forward.
It's like kind of a snowball.
So then we actually started getting government coming to us. We got to the point where I guess we were large enough where government's like, hey, like what you're doing is we're learning a lot from you. And they would come and speak at our events. They would engage with our ecosystem. You know, I got to have dinner with our premier and explain to him like, what Alberta could be and what's happening based on the rest of the provinces. And after that, we saw a massive uptick in support from the ministers engaging in this ecosystem.
That's great.
So I won't say I can accredit it to myself. I would say it's our whole community that's supported us in coming together to do it.
But you must be happy about that. No, you must feel some sense of pride.
I feel very prideful because when we first started, everyone thought of Toronto, and people in Toronto were like, stuff's happening in Alberta. Now everyone's like, I gotta come to Alberta. And it's like, yeah, you do.
I've met quite a few Torontonians here. Hey, I want to ask you about your sort of personal views and vision on crypto, which I know a little bit of, but you're obviously the leader of, sorry, I'm pointing to here, but you're the leader of the Canadian Blockchain Consortium. So it's all about blockchain. People here talk about Bitcoin, they talk about DeFi, they talk about the metaverse. I mean, it's all very inclusive in that sense. But I think your views are maybe a little bit more, let's say, clear cut towards one project than all the others. Is that true? How do you balance that as the head of the de facto national association?
Well, regardless of like my personal beliefs, my personal views, my political affiliations, this organization is neutral. This organization is designed to be inclusive. It's designed to be nonpartisan. Okay. And if I tried to influence only what I thought would work, then we're not actually supporting the ecosystem.
I mean, this would be a Bitcoin conference?
It would be a Bitcoin conference, most likely.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's...
And it really isn't. I mean, there's Bitcoin,
we had
but there's everything.
one topic on it, but it is important that this entire ecosystem grows. Like, we still do have our rules. Like, we don't support companies that issue out tokens that aren't registered with the Securities Commission. Okay. We're not really big into the NFTs yet. And and it's based more on like that regulatory kind of position where we find ourselves. Like, we do a lot of engagement with regulators, with government, and the credibility is very key. So areas that we're still, observing to see where it could go, once we know there's a clearer framework, we'll start welcoming them into the community. The actors that are like everyone that's part of us, is because we know they're working with their regulators. They're working with IROC. They're working with FinTrack. They're registered. They have amazing legal firms. Their teams want to give back to the community. Like, we're very particular because the brand that we represent is everybody else's brand, and we don't want to impact that negatively.
You don't want to create divisions or stuff. There's already a good amount of...
like, we would have never accepted Terra as a member.
Okay.
Ever.
That's a good thing.
So we would have never had them, some exchanges that weren't working towards regulation, we would have never accepted them. So we've been grateful to not have had our members be marred in scandal to impact the brands of, a lot of the other members that are with us.
You have a unique vantage point on the market. So I want to ask you maybe 1 or 2 minutes on Alberta, on Canada, and then on the world, because of course this is a borderless market. So I want to start with the Albertan market. Where are we at today? You have a new premier, of course. This event, which is creating a lot of buzz. Are you seeing growth? Are you, of course, notwithstanding the current sort of, not really volatility, I guess.
It's been amazing. The crypto winter has been, this is the one I've seen. It's probably the best one we've had in terms of the projects that were really solid, that built that foundation. They're maintaining and they're growing and they're doing mergers and acquisitions. And the ones that were really just there for pump and dump are the ones that are dying off. This is like, we're not bringing in, like $80,000 of Bitcoin right now. So, and we didn't actually plan for that because we took so much capital. So those ones, we're happy to see them drop off, because if you're not going to be a solid company, right, you're going to have market fluctuations. I mean, similar to the dawn of the internet, right? You saw a lot of pump and dump schemes, but I mean, this was in the 80s. Now, in the oil and gas industry too.
I think all
now,
industries.
Yeah, everything grows. Like Amazon.com, everything's off the internet boom, and people thought that was a bubble. It's like, no. Technology goes through that curve where it's like the ICO boom, all these market cycles create the awareness. And then people go, I could innovate off of that. So you're going to get some good projects, some crappy projects. You're always going to get those people that are like, ooh, get rich quick. I mean, that's in every industry. I don't care what. Right? Unfortunately, this industry seems to get marred in scandal every time one person does something bad. It's like the whole industry gets painted with the brush. So we're working on a solid PR strategy to help people understand. It's like, one bad apple doesn't ruin the bunch. I mean, we were taught that in school, right?
You have to get involved in that somehow, at least educationally speaking.
Exactly.
How do you feel about the election of Danielle Smith? I think you're a supporter, but what do you think it means for the development of crypto in Canada in Alberta and Canada?
So I'm truly grateful for Danielle. I had an opportunity to know her for the last 5 years, and she was emceed at one of our last events. And I asked her to. I know she was running, but I was like, I would really love for you to learn what these companies are doing, because I think it's so important for government to personalize this industry. These are people with paying jobs that are trying to support their families, that are hiring local. Like, these are good people, and she really sees
Smart
that.
people too.
And smart people. And I was beyond thrilled that she won. I definitely had like my flag backing hers. But I think that what she's going to do for Alberta is like, on a global scale, Alberta will be seen as that hub for blockchain and crypto. We're already becoming the DeFi hub for Canada. A lot of the major exchanges are located here. A lot of companies are moving from other jurisdictions to set up their offices in Alberta because our regulators are seen as the most friendly in Canada. Our government is in support of our regulators. Our government's created their own sandbox to support companies to test their market products in a secure way, make sure consumers are always safe and protected. I mean, they're even the ones who encouraged us to get the idea to develop out the insurance program to support crypto across the country.
Talk about that, actually. That's an incredible announcement you made yesterday. And as far as I know, it's like a breakthrough, not just in Canada, but potentially globally, right? Take a minute to talk about that.
So we were part of the Alberta government's announcement when they did the sandbox. And one of the things I heard the finance minister at the time say was you had to have insurance to go through the program. So I had a good meeting with them, and I was like, are you working with insurance companies that are going to provide reasonable rates for these companies going through this process? Because this is a very difficult thing to get. And he's like, well, actually, as of July 1st, our government has created a captive insurance program. You should think of developing out an industry association and supplying your own insurance to get better rates and coverage. And I was like, I know nothing about insurance, but I was like, that's interesting, because we're always trying to find ways, like, how do we support the community? How do we give back to the community? How do we help it so small players can still afford insurance? Because right now, some companies, it's $100,000 a year at least for $1 million in D&O coverage. And the insurance companies look at it similar to cannabis, and they're just like, they know that they can price gouge. They have absolutely outlandish, unreasonable rates. They don't pay any attention to the industry to take the time to do the actuarial science, to learn the risk profile of these businesses. They're just like, oh, well, you want it, here's, $300,000 a year. So I came out to the ecosystem and I reached out to 3IQ, Tetra Trust. I reached out to Cryptotherm, many other companies, but those are the ones who've allowed us to announce. And I was like, if we can come together as a community, one, you'll be able to reduce your own insurance rates. So I learned all about captive insurance. I learned about association captives and, the value benefit. And the thing that I love is because they know that we're here for the community. It's like, we want to support the community too. So let's help you. Let's do the feasibility studies. Let's set this up. Let's get the right legal frameworks in place. Let's develop out the right kind of policies so we can support mining companies. We can support ETFs. We can support crypto trading platforms and virtual asset service providers. So it was a trust companies, right? Being able to get D&O, E&O, general, theft, ransomware, cyber, all the different buckets that they can't really get access to, but for really good rates. And the industry is now supplying its own insurance. So we're hoping to be able to fully launch and be able to onboard people as of Q2 next year, because we have to get approved through the regulators. But yeah, we're really excited about that, because we think that this is one of the more impactful things we'll be able to do. And we really want to make sure that the small companies can get access to this vital service.
How competitive is Canada globally in crypto today? I mean, we heard a lot of our interviewees talk about, all the creation of Ethereum, Binance, first ETF, et cetera, a relatively favorable environment compared to many others.
We have supported trillions of dollars in the global ecosystem.
Right.
Through Canadians.
But a lot of projects or a lot of sort of IP has left Canada, hasn't it?
It has, and I would say that I'm definitely not opposed to regulation. Regulation doesn't move at the speed of innovation. I do believe that consumers need to be protected, right? But I believe that you should be able to introduce products to the market in a safe way. Okay. And as our regulators kind of learn about this space, it's a slower process, but I mean, we will have the gold standard of regulation as far as I'm concerned. In those earlier phases of people not quite understanding the space, they ended up leaving the country. And we are hoping, I know Ethereum is looking at launching a new product just in Canada, right? So that's going to be really exciting to see. I don't know much about the project. I just know they're looking at doing something here. And Binance Canada came back here and CZ started here. The very first Bitcoin ATM company that went public in Canada was here. The world's first Bitcoin ETF fund with 3IQ was started
Does
here.
that mean Canada is recognized globally, you think, as a hub? You've been to Miami, you've traveled to other locales around the world?
We're helping it be recognized as that hub. So one of the things we're doing in Miami next year, so we'll be there for Bitcoin 2023. I'm always at my Bitcoin conferences, all the way from Honey Badger in Latvia to Miami.
Wow.
Yep.
I hope to be able to join you next year. That'd be nice.
Oh, it's amazing. But we want to make Canada have the biggest splash in Miami. So a lot of people from the year I was there were talking about Ripple's yacht party. So we rented Ripple's, the same yacht that Ripple had.
Wow.
We're going to do an exclusive event, only Canadian sponsors. We're going to market and promote the crap out of it and showcase all these amazing brands in Canada. Because I'm pretty sure that 30,000 plus people that go to Miami, you know, you're getting like 2 to 5% that can be Canadian.
Yeah.
And Canadians aren't represented globally. So we're doing a lot of work there. We're doing our first trade mission to Texas to show the mining ecosystem in Alberta, Austin, Texas, because they have about 14% of the global hash rate.
Okay.
So we have like 20 plus companies coming down to Austin to showcase like, hey, Alberta's going to have a presence here. We'd like to look at collaborating, you know, in this state. We'd like to look at, you know, them being able to collaborate up in Alberta. We're going to go to Washington to work with the US Blockchain Association. And we work with the British Blockchain Association in 47 different countries that are involved in that.
Wow.
And every quarter showcasing, this is what Canada's doing. This is what we're working towards. This is how we're growing the ecosystem. This is what the regulations look like. So making sure that countries around the world are seeing Canada as that leader. And I know I have evidence because we have massive multi-billion-dollar companies coming to the CBC saying, Canadian Blockchain Consortium, coming to us saying, we'd like to enter the Canadian market and we'd like to work with you in our strategy for it. So this year is the first year that we've seen that, and they're big, big players. So we're really excited for the fact that Canada is now seen as a market to enter into.
That's awesome. And again, think of us. We would love to collaborate on those things. And if we get to travel to sunny destinations in the process, not so bad. So as we wrap up, a couple of quick fired questions. One of them is a question of your choice in 30 seconds, but I'm going to choose for you because I know which one you want. What is Bitcoin in 30 seconds? And maybe a little bit of why.
Bitcoin is the soundest money the world has ever seen because it's the only money the world has ever had that has known scarcity. So unlike gold, which is an unknown scarce amount, the more energy and resources you put towards mining gold, the more gold you receive. With Bitcoin, the more energy and resources you put towards mining Bitcoin, the same amount of Bitcoin you're going to receive. It's set in the Genesis block when it first was minted, 21 million Bitcoins, and you can buy a fraction of it. But it hedges against inflation. You can't double spend it, you can't inflate it, you cannot produce more of it. It has all the principles, it's a medium of exchange, it's a unit of account. It works with all the principles of money, but it's digital gold. So when I look at it from an economics perspective, the reason I'm so bullish on it, I guess I would say, is because this is the most incredible thing that's ever come. This is like one of the greatest innovations of human history.
Why is that then? Why do we need Bitcoin? I mean, most people understand inflation. That's pretty clear. Is that just it, or are there more ramifications into sort of not just the economy, but the whole society or how we live as humans, basically?
Absolutely. I don't think people realize, like, you say most people understand inflation, but do they truly understand inflation? Right.
They have a notion of inflation.
When your government is allowed to continuously produce its own money, so the more money you create, the more dollars that float in the ecosystem, right? The more you actually devalue that currency.
Yeah.
And since they took it off the gold standard in the 70s, it started coming off after World War I, World War II. Reason being, they didn't have enough gold to be able to fund this expansive war. So it's like, all right, let's take it off the gold standard for a short time, print a ton of our American greenbacks and our other dollars. We promise we'll go back to the gold standard, but we want to be able to really win this war and buy as much crap as we can. So then they ended up going back to the gold standard, and slowly over time, by Nixon abolishing it in 70 or 71,
I think, yeah.
Right? It was based on gross domestic product, and the government could print as much money as they wanted because they followed what's called Keynesian economics. They believed in spend theory. The more money they introduce into the ecosystem, the more it stimulates job spending and growth. But if you look at the time of the Renaissance era, where there was few wars, there was stability, there was a gold standard, you had philosophy, you had art, you had culture, you expanded, families knew that they could trust their money, right?
Versus what do we have today? We have consumerism, wars,
Well, it's like
conflict.
money is meaningless. Money is meaningless because it's just like you're incentivized to spend every dollar you earn as quickly as you have it because the next day you're going to be able to buy just that much less.
And we have clear examples of that, right? Like
absolutely
Argentina,
clear.
Venezuela, Zimbabwe, Nigeria,
some are up to 191% inflation. So if you're making your minimum wage and your inflation is rising percentage points every single year and your wage is not increasing at the rate of inflation, you're not able to survive. People have to choose between food and electricity or housing or shoes on their children's feet.
And even if you're able to survive, let's say, because luckily most people do survive, you aren't able to save, so you're not able to plan for a future, perhaps your kids' education.
You can't buy a
perhaps.
House. Yeah. You can't save
be constructive,
for a home.
Right? You can't build.
Why would you want to buy a home with the interest rates that are completely unstable to try and offset and hedge inflation? But it's not just even in that monetary aspect. It even impacts our food and our way of living, because when money is so meaningless and you can produce billions of it at a time, it's like you're looking for the cheapest possible way to be able. So look at all the chemicals in our food. Instead of growing healthy, natural food, you're slamming as many chemicals as you can into it. I mean, a lot of food, like honey, 98% of it on the market isn't even real. Olive oil is manufactured and cheap, and most of that isn't even true olive oil. You're seeing all these different things coming up. It's all about
the price being as low as possible.
As low as possible, as mass produced as possible, but you don't really care about your money when it's like, oh, the government's going to slam out hundreds of millions of dollars anyway, right? Like, I mean, in COVID, our government produced 80% of Canada's entire money in circulation in 2 years. And people are saying, oh, we're only at 4% inflation. You don't even know basic math, if that is your understanding of it. And you haven't seen the impacts of that to date. You have no idea how much higher interest rates are going to rise, the lack of affordability that we're going to see, the food shortages that are going to come from it. It impacts everything. So the reason I'm so supportive of Bitcoin is because it could become the global reserve currency. It's actual money. Yes, it currently is still volatile. I do appreciate that, but it's volatile.
It's actually not been that volatile in the last few months.
Well, it has market cycles. It has its market cycles, but I came in 2016. Even though it went from 70K down to 20K, I still got it in 2016. So I look at it as a long-term savings plan for myself. I see it as a store of value. Once it has more market adoption, like 13% of Canadians own Bitcoin compared to when I started in this industry,
and
5%.
A quarter plan to buy crypto next year.
Exactly. Right? So people are seeing what their governments are doing and going, even the biggest businesses in the world know if they hold their assets in fiat currency, they're losing almost 15 basis points per year. At least in crypto, on an annual basis, you're going to at least increase your holdings depending on when you get in, or maybe over a 2-year cycle. But holding in fiat, there's no way you can save.
Maybe one final little story, which I think is great, is your pinned tweet. We're big on Twitter, as you know, and you have this great story where you say it was the year maybe 2016, and I tell that story, like you cashed in all the money of your children's study fund, or...
So when my first son was born, I had someone with RESPs come to my house, and they're like, oh, we can save for your son. So by the time that he goes to university, like a lot of the cost is covered. So I took the child tax benefit that the government gave me, and every month all that money went into his little savings account. And by the time he was 11 and I was pregnant with my second son, I looked and it's like, I'd made no money at it. It actually had lost money. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, how am I supposed to be able to save for my kid's future? And I was learning about Bitcoin. I was like, you know what? I believe in this so strongly. My conviction was very powerful. And I cashed out everything. They were like, don't do it. Don't do it. I was like...
Are we talking about a pretty significant amount of money at that time? Or was it meaningful money for you?
It was meaningful for me. Right.
It
so like...
not money that you wanted
when
to
When I had my first son, I was a struggling single mom who could barely afford to put diapers on the table. I had a high school level education. You know, I learned how to be an entrepreneur. But I worked 2 jobs 6 days a week to put food on the table for my son.
And people must have called you crazy for doing that?
Oh, they called me absolutely crap crazy. But now each one of them has Bitcoin, and both of them can go to college.
So they have their own. You've sort of allocated it to them individually, and wow, that's a wonderful story. Look, we could ask you questions all day long. I mean, you're so passionate, so well educated. You just mentioned you only have a high school degree. You certainly don't sound like it. Any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to share? Any future plans? Maybe this video will be the first we will release, so probably like mid next week. So anything you want to tell us about maybe the next events, the next programs, or any announcements?
Well, I would say that we're very excited to be attending Blockchain Research Institute's Web3 Summit in November.
Okay.
We're planning our trade mission to Austin, Texas in November as well.
Okay.
We will have our annual technology symposium in April, and then we're planning on taking our big blockchain summit across the country. For big plans, we want to grow. Our big goal next is 100 members. So we can register as a trade association and give even more value and support to our members with more and stronger government engagement.
And that's within reach, no? That might be 2023, 100 members?
2023, I think we're gonna hit our goal.
And when you say you want to take the summit on tour, so does that mean that the same summit is going to change location every year? So it won't necessarily be in Calgary?
No, because we want it, like, as a national organization, if we only have a Canadian summit in one...
Yeah, and you already do a lot of events here anyway,
We do a lot of events here, but we want to see what it would look like in Toronto and showcase, like, this is how Alberta, and how we host in Alberta.
Yeah,
like
the two. And...
Yeah, let's bring that out east, and then maybe Vancouver the year after
Montreal.
that, right? Montreal. Like, we want to make sure that we're growing the ecosystem in every jurisdiction that we're in.
That's freaking awesome. You are awesome. I really, really appreciate your time. And this is going to be one of our best interviews. Koleya Karringten, Executive Director of the Canadian Blockchain Consortium, founder and CEO, co-founder and CEO, I should say, of Absolute Combustion, the Canadian Blockchain Association for Women, also from her...
Blockchain Insurance, Inc.
Blockchain Insurance, Inc. So stay tuned. Keep watching this lady because she isn't done. Again, thank you very much here from the Canadian Blockchain Consortium in beautiful Calgary. Watch all the other videos. Cheers.